Yeah, hello. We are in the fourth hangout of the cope14 MOOC, and I'm very happy to have with me Danny. Hi, Danny.
Hi, Jutta. Pleased to.
Rahul. Hi, Rahul.
Hello.
And Gudrun. Hi, Gudrun. Uh, Gudrun will introduce week 5 at the end of the hangout, but at the moment I want to focus on Danny and Rahul. And probably everybody from you learners already now know Danny. So maybe, Rahul, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So I'm already introduced by name. I'm Rahul Singh. I'm associate professor with one of the business schools in India, that is Birla Institute of Management Technology. Primarily, my working is into emerging markets and sustainability, and I address issues related to how the opportunities are coming up in the emerging markets, how the developed systems of developed market companies are interested, and how are they executing their systems in emerging markets for developing maybe the same models and profiting, and maybe developing new models and profiting. So some of the researches which I with some of my colleagues have conducted in past are in India and Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Thailand, and of course we have a very strong research group in Europe. The 4 countries in Europe and 4 or 5 countries in emerging markets like China, Russia, India, Bangladesh. So we are building a great research data on how business from developed markets is looking towards business in emerging markets. I think cooperation, I look at emerging market practices from this perspective, that developed systems can help emerging markets to build great businesses. And that's the reason partnership is important. And that's where my area of working is actually. So I'm bound to cooperate with the good universities around the world because my research area is like that. So this is the research area I'm pursuing, and I'm happy to be part of this when I was invited by a professor to contribute the way possible I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. And before this hangout, we spoke a little bit, and you said that you love MOOCs. Okay, so now we are at the end of week 4, and I would be interested in how do you feel at the end of week 4? How was week 4 for you, Danny?
Okay. I was looking for a suitable metaphor, and I think the metaphor that comes to my mind is probably specifically Austrian, so I'm not sure if it translates well to other cultural areas, but it's the one of an avalanche. So an avalanche is a huge mass of snow which you first can't hear coming, but when you hear it and see it, it's too late. So the same happened in this week. It was a slow start, as I experienced it, with very little participation. Made me already a bit concerned about how we set up this course, and perhaps we set the level too high. And then over the weekend, I must say, so from Friday, Saturday, and especially Saturday and Sunday, there were many, many contributions, very interesting contributions. I looked at many of the resources that learners posted on Facebook and in the blog, etc. And I found most of them very useful, and discovered a lot of things that I didn't know before. So for me, it was rewarding. I hope it was rewarding for the others as well. I get the feeling, at least from the many postings that I read, that many of the learners did actually enjoy and get and take something away from this course. And I think they are still taking away, because I don't expect that they have stopped thinking, reading, and searching for suitable resources on the web.
Okay. Do you have an example what you have learned from the learners?
Oh yes, I think just today. Let me check. I have to switch here to a different website. Where is it? Yeah, I think I closed that tab. But where is it? It was a posting of on Facebook. Sorry, where somebody referred to an article or a blog post, I would say, from yeah, I don't know, a person unknown to me before, and he described what's important when building business relationships. And I already commented on this person's blog that I've never seen such a comprehensive but true elaboration on what's important when building business relationships and how to build those. So it's a very useful resource that I will later on add to my favorites in my teaching resources. So I can only recommend, if it was rewarding for me, it must be rewarding for some other people as well. So I can only recommend every learner should look through the comments and look at the resources that were posted, because they were very useful.
Okay, this was a nice experience, I think. As this week was a little bit complex, I thought that maybe you, Danny, and Rahul could discuss the week, but not at an abstract level as we had it in the materials and the assignments, but maybe an easier approach to the week and speak about these 4 chapters, so that at the end of the week the learners will get a sort of overview what had happened, and maybe they can put their learning experiences to some of your comments.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the 4 chapters, just to recall them, is cooperation in supply chains. So there are a lot of issues surrounding the supply chain and the term supply chain and what is a supply chain, etc. Have been discussed. Then customer relationship management in industrial markets, where we put a few tasks also and asked the learners to compare 2 different concepts, one from key account management and the other one from industrial relationships or customer relationships in industrial markets. Then, because we talked about relationship, it was natural to continue to the cooperation, to the issue of cooperation. And if you talk about cooperation, you also have to speak about competition and the hybrid, which is called co-opetition. And then finally we ended up in networks and ecosystems, which is a form of organizing cooperation and co-opetition, a very contemporary form of organizing cooperation and co-opetition. So if we should discuss it, Rahul and me, I think, or I would suggest that we could discuss the logic that is behind this week's 4 building blocks. When we start, as I said, with the cooperation in supply chains, which is a very industrial point of view, industrial way of looking at cooperation, very limited view. Supply chain is something concrete. And then we move on to extending this view beyond the supply chain, in also looking at how do we relate to the customer. And then we introduce the other aspects of cooperation and competition, etc., and then the network view. And my question, which I would like to ask you, Rahul, I'm very curious to hear your opinion, because you're from an emerging market, and your center of research or your area of research is concepts from the Western world being applied to emerging markets and looking whether they work, whether they don't work, whether there are different concepts in emerging markets that perhaps can be translated to the Western, to the developed, industrially developed markets. Do you also see that logic? Would that logic also apply to India, or is there something else that some other concepts that are different in emerging markets, or specifically in India?
Thanks for setting the background for this. I think I would build on the 4 sections which you have already created here. But before that, I would like to design kind of a situation. And the situation is this. When we are talking about business, which is more connected internationally, what we are talking about is either I'm going to enter in a different market and going to do business, which is, of course, not going to happen in isolation. It is going to have certain networks, right? I need to compromise on the design that I have if I'm coming from an American market or, let's say, a UK market, because the market where I'm entering in would not be able to accept the same business design. And so I need to kind of integrate myself in the system which is already existing, and then I need to build a new system because I can't qualify the existing system in this emerging market. And that's where the merging or collaboration or marriage of 2 systems take place. Now, this local system in an emerging market is required because you can't otherwise do your business. You don't understand the local market. And your system is required because otherwise you won't be able to differentiate yourself, right? So there is a chance and there is a need and there is actually a requirement to optimize the 2 systems that we have. Now, in this optimization process, sometimes we have done a mistake as a developed market multinational when we are in the emerging markets. And those mistakes are primarily in the business networks. For me, the blood of any input, or let's say a reward of any organization is distribution channel. It's not sales. If there is a right distribution channel, sales would happen given the required effort. But if distribution channel is not there and you're doing all the efforts to sell your products and service, it is too difficult to make a pitch in that market. So the issue here I would like to raise, the business networks are the most important requirements to execute your business, if not build your business. So execution is more important. You know, there is a saying that 10% ideation and 90% perspiration. Mm-hmm. And this perspiration is actually the whole system of execution, or so-called that we are addressing the issue of business networks. Mm-hmm. Your focus has primarily been on supply chain, but actually it's the whole horizontal and vertical ecosystem. Thanks for using the word called ecosystem. Ecosystem's purpose is not to create a design. Ecosystem is to identify each and every stakeholder who is able to influence the business. Mm-hmm. So it could be a supplier, it could be a seller, it could be a customer, it could be government, it could be any other variable, right? So addressing your issue, these things are little complex from the perspective of a developed nation, multinational. So, yes.
Hey, Rahul, thank you for mentioning the ecosystem, because that metaphor, of course, is loaned from nature, yeah, from plants and animals, etc. And that brings me to a point which may be relevant. Even the plants and the animals are different in India than they are, for instance, compared to Austria. So we don't have as many tigers as you have, although the number of tigers is decreasing in India as well. And we do have different plants. So if we use that metaphor, we can also say that even business ecosystems must be different in different countries, in different cultures. So the business ecosystem is certainly has to consist of different elements, like you said. You mentioned the channels and the business partners like banks, etc. Different relationships to governments, and all the stakeholders that come into play. So certainly the ecosystem has to be designed differently. The idea of having an ecosystem and nurturing an ecosystem is probably the same, but how we build an ecosystem is certainly different from one country to another, or one culture to another, perhaps. I'm not so sure what the importance of culture is, but I'm sure that there is some significance of culture. And perhaps I can also add something to the term ecosystem itself, because you hinted at it. When we compare a supply chain with an ecosystem, I think a supply chain is something consciously designed. It doesn't happen. It is designed by somebody, usually a company that builds its own supply chain. Whereas an ecosystem I would compare with a garden. You plant certain trees or bushes and flowers, but they grow by themselves. Your function is that of a gardener. You have to make sure that the ecosystem works, that all the species you have in your garden work together so that the garden in the end is beautiful, or whatever you want to get out of it. Maybe you want to eat the plants and beauty is not your major concern, but whatever. Yeah? But you leave the growing and the small issues to the plants and the animals themselves. You just make sure that it works in harmony. Whereas in the supply chain, you are very active. So today we really speak about ecosystem, but that also requires different competencies of the people who are responsible for such ecosystem. They have to plant seeds. They don't have to do anything any longer. They have to plant the seeds for their success. They have to make sure that all the participants can work together in harmony. You know, perhaps there are some cultures who are better suited to that kind of thinking, that systems thinking. And I wonder whether cultures in emerging markets, and India is probably an example that would come first to my mind when I think about this holistic view of life. Religion may play a role, etc. That some cultures are better suited to holistic systems thinking. Do you have any? Have you thought about this before? Or have you experienced that there are differences between cultures? Where some cultures may be more suitable to the kind of technical design of systems, and other cultures are more suited to letting it happen and sort of interfere just when it's necessary, but leave the rest to the species, so to speak.
Yeah, in fact, thanks for adding this point. The next sentence of my discussion point was very much that itself, that when we are talking about the ecosystem in emerging markets, they are never universal. While the designed processes in multinationals, and the definition of multinational I'm taking as they are coming from usually developed markets, you know, unless you count the multinationals which are moving from emerging markets, which has started happening in last usually 15 years. Mm. Otherwise, the assumption of multinational was that they are coming from developed markets, and that means the systems are highly designed. And one of the mistakes some of these emerging markets, some of these multinational did, was that they treated emerging markets universally. And that's where the issue that you are raising, culture, or the other variables which are influenced by the culture, is really very important. So while you have many frameworks, I'm just connecting other theories because it is a good idea to have those theories proving that our thoughts are right. While we have, you know, McKinsey and Boston and maybe Goldman Sachs, all these giving their own framework, the internationalization framework given by Pankaj Khemawat as CAGE model, which I also discuss in my classes in emerging market, the first alphabet of this is C. So CAGE model is CAGE, and C means culture. When you are entering an emerging market, each emerging market is different in its cultural perspective. And so you have to understand, like you already said, India, you can never read India into one sentence. So in one location, India is going to be highly sensitive to service sector. In other location, it is going to be highly supportive to manufacturing sector. And in the third location, probably it is not supporting to any of these two. So if the expansion takes place in by mistake in a location which has no skills and competency actually, at this point of time I'm referring to parts of east of India, then many companies have done that mistake and they have lost money. So these kind of things may happen. But you go to Vietnam, probably it's one of the great locations of manufacturing. You go to Turkey, and now you will find that the whole textile industry of Europe is focusing manufacturing in Turkey because of the supply chain cost saving as well. So you get a quality that you are looking for because Turkey can understand Europe better because of the distance, and culturally more aligned in a way, if not completely different. And also that supply chain, because of the business network, you're reducing the cost. So instead of having it from China and Bangladesh, Europe is getting benefited in the cost advantage. So some of these issues, and I'm taking emerging market issues, the business networks are important, but of course they cannot be isolated with other variables, influential variables like culture or administrative issues and so on.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question from one of the learners from Surfeed about competition. And she's interested into, or he, I don't know, into the actual implementation of competition between companies. And she writes, competition is a good means for collaboration, but how is competition handled from contract, patent, legal, and other standpoints?
Mm-hmm. Shall I answer? Yeah. Competition is something we find very often today. One of the most often cited examples is from the automotive industry, where I give you a concrete example. BMW cooperates with Peugeot, until recently at least, in building engines. And these car engines, motors, are used both in Peugeot and in BMW cars, in the smaller BMW cars, in the Mini. So by sharing the risk and the cost of development and the cost of manufacturing, they both benefit, but of course on the market both compete with each other. When Mini, the brand from BMW with these car engines, competes with the smaller Peugeot cars. And it's not, of course, the engine is in cars very often a factor where cars differentiate, but obviously the benefits outweigh the disadvantages in this case, the benefits being cost and risk sharing. As to the question of how do you deal with that issue from a contractual point of view, I think it's very straightforward. You can really separate the development and the manufacturing of specific car engines from any other issue competitive issue that you face as a company. In this case, I think they built a separate factory, so you can establish such a factory as an incorporated company, perhaps as a joint venture, which is also seen in other industries, like Philips cooperating with Panasonic in the manufacture of television sets, or at least parts for television sets. So quite often you find that the two companies who cooperate establish that cooperation as a separate company, as an incorporated company, and that company has then its own business dealings with both partners, or both owners, so to speak, or it can be more than two owners, of course. That is a very common way, yes. I think, and that's the best, in my view, the cleanest way to separate the issue. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so there are no problems from a legal point of view, in your opinion?
I don't think that there have to be problems. I think you can deal with the problems in a very straightforward way. You know, the book Co-Petition by Brandenburger and Nailbuff also is based on game theory. And when you think about game theory, you should also think about the problem of free riders. So what you have to be careful about is that your partner or one of your partners is not a free rider, getting all the benefits but not contributing. And that issue has to be taken care of, and that's a management task, obviously. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And there was another question as well from Surfit about customer relationship management. In the assignment, you wanted the learners to look at different classifications. And Surfit asks that the underlying structure seems to stay the same, regardless how it is called. Can you comment on this, please?
Rahul, if you want to fill in, just feel free. Yeah? Otherwise, I'm the chatty type, you know. Yes, I think there has been a lot of discussion on this particular page in our blog. So my opinion is that they are very similar, these two structures. And one participant posted that one structure is more a historic view, and the other, so kind of looking at the development of relationships from the small beginnings, arm's length, to the intimate at the end, where I don't agree. If you read the material where this concept is taken from, the authors clearly say that the relationship in key account management doesn't have to go from A to D. It can stop at A. It doesn't have to progress, because for some companies it's actually better to deal at arm's length. They don't have to become intimate partners. It's just not suitable. So there is no automation or automatic automatic move. Now I'm missing the right words. There is no necessity, I would say, to move from arm's length to the intimate relationship. Some of these stages are better suited for certain companies, and only a few actually will be able to get into an intimate relationship. But basically there is a lot of similarity in the concepts.
Okay. Okay, so as there are no further questions, it would be great if Danny and Rahul, if you can conclude your week now in this hangout.
Rahul, do you want to start, or shall I start?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. My conclusion is that, well, for me it was beneficial to participate in this MOOC because like I mentioned in the beginning, because of the many contributions that we received over the weekend, like an avalanche. I'm still busy with looking through all the postings, and I hope that the underlying idea of how things started and how important relationships are in business, and where we are now, and what kind of extended view, the network view of relationships we should have today, that this idea caught on with the audience. That's how I would like to conclude this week. What would you say, Rahul? Is that something you can subscribe to, or?
My take on this issue is like this. The issue of business network actually is not very easy, even by the companies. So when we are learning about supply chain and competition and collaboration and co-opetition, I think these are some of the issues which are highly complex, and we need a right judgment only to ensure that we are doing right. There is no measure on which you can say collaboration is going right or cooperation is going better. Mm-hmm. So it's only the judgment, and business education is about making right judgment for the decision. It's not just taking decisions. So we're probably learning learning how to learn from examples to make a good judgment on when to collaborate, when to cooperate, and when probably not to do any of these things, and just build a system which works better than these two, if those companies have guts to do that. So the issue here is, when you're talking about these issues of supply chain network, collaboration, and competition in developed markets and in emerging markets, I think the content that you have given in the MOOC course is fantastic, but it's not an easy, I would say, easy concept. Had it been easy, companies would have never failed. So,
right.
Companies have failed. They are great companies. I know at least 22, 23 companies in Fortune 500 who did stupid kind of mistakes entering new markets or even expanding in their own markets. So this is a complex issue. It is not simple, because it is about not decision making or financial balance sheet. It is about kind of having a judgment, which comes with experience and learning, of course, and especially the case studies from the market. Mm-hmm. So if there are confusions, it is good, because it is not confusion. You are creating assumptions to qualify to a concluding remark. And if you kill those assumptions, you have done the right judgment. So I would rate it very high. If there is confusion, it is good. In some of the thinking modules in School of Thoughts, some confusions are actually very positive. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rahul. Yes. Are you happy with our conclusions, Jutta?
Yeah. Yes, I'm happy. Thank you a lot for this conclusion of week 4. And now I want to look forward to week 5 and ask Gudrun to switch on her microphone perfect. And Gudrun, do you want to introduce yourself, and then week 5, please?
Yes, hello. I'm very happy to do so. First, I really want to thank my colleagues who have talked before, Danny and Rahul, because I think lots of the topics they have mentioned make a perfect bridge into week 5, because in week 5 now our topic will be international communication and negotiation, and I think what you did in week 4 and what we are talking right now, which I found really interesting, for example, the systems approach Rahul mentioned, and the nice metaphor, Danny, you mentioned in comparing first the supply chain, and then on the contrary, talking about a garden where you would have to plan the growing, the ecosystem like that. I think communication is can be looked upon as one of these soft factors in doing business and doing successfully business. And I think success or failure in doing international business really more and more depends on doing the communication well or getting the communication right. Yeah, and I think this is one of the topics we are going to talk about in week 5. But before I conclude on the content of week 5, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit. As you know already, my name is Gudrun Reimert, and I'm teaching at the Department of Journalism and Public Relations here at the FH Joanneum. My own background is one in media communication and linguistics, so very deeply into communication and the foundations for a successful communication. And yeah, I think our first assignment in week 5 will focus on the very changing of the concept of the public, how the public as a notion which has been addressed before as a very clear addressee. The concept of public is changing when you look at the modern communication possibilities and tools. So we will focus on this a little bit, and then we are going to discuss intercultural communication and international communication and negotiation a little bit closer in assignment 2 and 3. And we will have with us Mariam Bigdeli, who is working as a consultant in a highly international intercultural background in Vienna. And I think she has some very nice examples and case studies which you can have a look at in the videos. So I'm really looking forward to the communications and the discussions of all the learners here, and I really like to invite you to bring all your own personal backgrounds, business-oriented or project-oriented, internationally, and your international interests, actually. Yeah. So your how do I say it? Being curious about different cultures, different nations. Bring all these interests into the week 5, and I think we will have very highly animated discussions here, and I hope so.
Okay, thank you, Gudrun. I'm looking forward to week 5 and to communication, negotiation, and yeah, thank you a lot for this hangout. Bye-bye, Danny and Rahul, and bye-bye, Gudrun. We will meet again in the hangout of next week.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Ciao.
Ciao. Have a nice evening.
Bye. Take care.